Hello, and welcome back to another episode where I'll show you how to program a video game using the processing programming language. I'm using processing 3.5.3. In my opinion, processing is the best programming language to start out learning programming. It's very easy to deploy. You just download it and it just runs. Has a number of great examples you can open up. And I think the best way to start learning is to just modify some of the examples. I won't be modifying the examples here, but I'll be showing you how to program this top-down 2D video game, like an action RPG. So in the last episode, I showed how to animate the player, and the episode before that, I basically um, created a basic map system so you could scroll the map and display a player on the map. So in the last episode, I also encountered a bug where the player wasn't able to move past like the middle of the screen. As you can see here, I'm actually pressing the button to go forward, but it won't let me go forward, and it makes me go back. I'm not pressing the buttons when it goes in the opposite direction here. So if I try to go to the right, it'll make me go left for some reason. If I try to go down, it'll make me go up. This is if I go, try to go like further than like midway through the screen about. So, anyways, I found the bug. It's a pretty simple bug. It's a little bit of a complicated, I guess, concept of why it messed up. But, anyways, it was what I was doing here in the sprite. It's basically it's because I was setting the position of the sprite, rather setting the object that represents the position of the sprite to the object that represents the position of the player. And really, the reason why it's doing this for people who are new to programming, I'll make a diagram here because it's actually a little bit kind of difficult of a concept to understand. So basically, what I did was well, here, let me make it like this. So there's a class called pvector that processing provides. So it's called pvector. Put pvector, make that bold so you can see it's a class. So that's the class that pvector provides, and then you can make objects of it. So I made a couple of different objects of it. I made an object in the player. I made let's call it player position. I call it like player dot position rather. I guess is probably makes more sense here. So I made this player dot position. I set this up, blah blah blah, did whatever, and then I made another one for the sprite. So I did the sprite position. I actually call that pose. And what I did is basically when you create a new object in the game, like you have a class. This is basically like a blueprint for what the object is going to be. So you use the class constructor. Well, what I did in this case was I created this this object. Rather, it's just like a reference to an object. So maybe it's better to kind of notate it like this. So when you say like this in the code, it creates what's called a reference to an object. So it doesn't actually have an object until you put the object into it. So I basically, when I set this here, position equals I position, basically let me see where I call this function to create the actual player. Player equals new player, and then here you go. So this is the new p vector. It creates a new p vector. So basically, it passes that in through the player function, goes down here to the player function, into here through this variable, and it sets the position to that. So it set the position to this new object. It basically like passed in this new object to. I'll denote the actual object. So I'll use. I don't know. I'll use like this again. So anyway, so this is like the actual object. So the pvector class, it when you call the constructor function, which is just the same name as pvector, it actually creates this object. It like delivers this object to you. This is a reference. It basically is like a box that holds an object, and it can be empty. So what I did was I put this object inside of the I put this object that I created inside of the reference here, the player dot position, this reference that I created. So now it actually has like real object. It has like real values in it right now. So like say like 12 coordinates, the x and y coordinates or whatever. And basically then what I did was in the sprite class, when I constructed the sprite class inside of here, I did not use that the new function, or rather the constructor function, which is by calling new p vector. I only did that for the player, and then what I did with the sprite class was I took the so when the player created the sprite, it passed in its position object to that sprite class, and the sprite class, what it should be doing is copying the values from that object and then putting it in this its position object. But what it did was it assigned it basically referenced this object instead, is the terminology. Basically what it did was that it actually it like stored that object also. So basically, like I set it so that it like contained both of these. It contained this object. It actually referenced this object. Maybe it's a better way to denote it like this, the way that traditional other programming languages kind of specify what they call this like a pointer instead of a reference. Java calls it a reference. So basically, it was referencing, basically like you can imagine this p vector. The new p vector function creates this object inside of memory, and it just contains this data inside of it. And then these are the references which actually they reference that data. So what I did was I set player position to point to that, and then later I set sprite position to point to the same thing. So when I was doing updates on the player position, then I was subsequently doing an update on the sprite position. It was changing the value of this like unintendedly, whereas the sprite position, it should be pointing to its own object. So what I need to do is tell pvector, give me another one of these objects. So tell pvector, like, give me another one of these objects. It'll start out just totally blank, and then I'll set sprite position to that object that the pvector class gave me. And then what I'll do is I'll copy in these values. When I construct my sprite, I'll copy in the values for the player, so that the sprite is pointing to is referencing its own object, and then the player is referencing its own object. So that's basically what the problem was. So in order to do that, what I'll do is I have to, as I said, create a new p vector object. You do it like this, new p vector, and I can copy in this constructor method. I can copy in the values that I need. So it'll be iPosition.x, iPosition.y. So whatever vector that you're passing in here, it wants to just use the values of the vector, and it doesn't want to actually reference this object in memory. It wants to just copy the values out of it. So it'll copy the x and it'll copy the y value, and this creates an object based on those values, and then sets this POS, this references the object that was created here. So that's basically what the problem was. So anyways, you can see that it works now that I did that. So that's kind of an advanced concept in programming, I guess, for if you're a beginner. But that's just something you want to watch out for in Java, that you're not actually referencing like the same object in memory. You're actually creating separate objects in memory when you need to do so. So okay, so that fixed that problem. So anyways, what I'm going to do this time is I'll tell you guys how to actually load in a map. So what I want to do here is I'll create, well, let me see here, and I'll look in the map. There we go, the map class. I'll create a function for the map class to load map, and then that should take a string file name, f name, call it, and what it'll do. Actually, what I want to do is I'm going to use JSON, JSON, which is a protocol for storing data and representing data. Actually, sorry, I got to put void as a return type, so it doesn't return anything, just a function to, or a method rather, to perform a a task. So that'll load a map, and I'm going to load from a JSON file. So I'll show you what that looks like actually. I have one in my data folder. Actually, I'll copy it out of the data folder from the original game that I created here that I'm kind of like recreating for you people to see. So these are the maps. You see they're .json.json. So I'll take the map one. Let me open that up. I'll open it with Atom. Okay, Atom is a cool little free text editor you can download. At least it's for Mac. I used to use Notepad++ on Windows computers. That's a good editor. So anyways, this is it just shows you the text. Atom is made for like programmers, so it knows it knows the JSON protocol. It understands it. It kind of highlights it, makes it easier to read. But you can just use any text editor you want. So anyways, I'm scrolling down through this because this contains information about like enemies and items inside of the game. But I'm going to extract the information out of this only for the the actual map. So okay, so here's the map data down here. So JSON, it's kind of easy way. I mean, you can kind of like read, what it all means. So it says it's just a list of tiles basically, and you see the tile, and then it has different values for the tiles. 0, which is the index to the grass tile in the palette. 3, which is, I don't remember, is like a rock or something, and blah blah blah. So we have those different tiles here. It defines. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to leave the file as it is for now. Because the cool thing about JSON is that you don't need to you don't need to input all the data out of here. You just like ask for what object that you want to, or object or array that you want to read out of the file, and it gives it to you really easily. So I'll just keep the file as it is, and it'll work just fine. So let me go back to that folder, and I'm just going to copy that file into the data folder for my processing sketch. So yeah, by the way, that's the way the processing sketches work. They all have a data folder with them, and you put your information and you put all your files inside the data folder if you want to read them. You can read from other places, but if you have them in the data folder, that's like the default folder that it uses to read the files out of. So what I want to do, I'm kind of looking at this I'm kind of looking at this old code here that I wrote. So what I want to do is I need to create a JSON object. This is included with the processing. It's a class called a JSON object. So it basically allows you to create just an object that uses the JSON protocol, the JSON language. You might hear people say it's a language. It's basically like a programming language. So load JSON object, and then so this is a function that processing provides you, and it lets you load a JSON object from the file, whatever the file name is. So this is just like a string of characters. Like I could actually like type in, the name of the file. It's like whatever map1.json whatever. But anyways, I'm gonna pass that in through this parameter to this function, and so what that does is it JSON object. I'm gonna call that obj master for like master object, which is like it loads all the data from the file basically. And then I'm going to create a JSON array. So there's two different like structures in JSON. There's an object and then there's an array. An object can store arrays. An array can store objects. Anyways, it's just like a different way of representing data. It's basically an object works the same. It's kind of like how objects in the code here works in Java and processing works. It's just like it's basically a structure that has a name and it contains a bunch of data in it that also has names. And then the JSON array is just a list of JSON objects, or other just regular values like integers, strings, whatever it is. So anyways, I'm going to create that. I'm going to just call this array, and that is going to equal, it's going to ask object master to get the JSON array named map, which is that this is like the name here is pretty much arbitrary. It's just how I decided to name the the array inside of this file. You could name it really whatever, and it'll conform to the JSON standard. But I called it map because there's two sections of the data inside of my maps. There's one is like the game objects, which are like the items and the enemies and stuff like that. And or I don't remember exactly how I set it up, but there's a few different sections. There's one for the item, there's one for the enemies, and there's one for the map, and I think there's also one section for the player position. They all have different names to them. So this part is called map. It's just an array of tiles. So yeah. Anyway, so I created that array. I got the map part, like the map section of the file. Or the map section of the data, rather, I should say, that was from the file. And then I'm going to create a JSON object called tile. I'll call it obj tile to stick with the kind of naming convention I got here. Equals, and whoops, I'll just leave that as a reference for now, an empty reference. And what I'm going to do is actually read through the different objects. I'm going to look at my old code here. I forget exactly how I did this. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through the array, and I'm going to actually loop through the you could do this a couple of different ways. Like you could well, let's see here. So I'll go ahead and I'll loop through based on the number of tiles that are actually stored in this array, this JSON array. So array.size will give you that number, and then what I want to do is for each time I loop through, I'm going to set that obj tile to the object that's stored in the array. So you get JSON object that takes an object out of the array at the index I. So it basically just loops through each index inside of that array, and it gets the JSON object assigned to this object tile. And now I'm going to transfer the data from this object tile into my actual map, which is, it stores it in this array called tiles. If you remember from the first or second episode, I created this. So it's going to be here, tiles sub I equals obj tile dot get int tile. So basically, this is how you work with the JSON objects: is that you ask it for whatever data type that you want based on the name in there that you called the data. So it could be like pretty much arbitrary, but anyways, this is capable of storing like more data points for each tile than just this. But I only have this object is only composed of one piece of data, which is just the tile index. It's basically an index into the tile palette. So anyway, so I'm asking it. I'm saying give me the integer that's named tile for each one of these objects. So so each one of these, this is one item in the array. This is array sub 0. This is array sub 1, array sub 2, array sub 3. So as you can imagine, just it reads in this object and extracts this data out, reads in this object, extracts this data out, reads in this object, extracts this data out. That's all it's doing. One extra thing I can kind of do here that will make this a little bit better is that I want to make sure that that we don't overflow the boundaries of this array, because the file, you could have however many of these as you want inside of the file. So if you're like editing the file and you make a mistake and you put more than there are, you put more tiles inside of the file than there is room for them in this in the array that you created for the map, then it'll cause your program to crash. So basically, let me see here. Where did I set the? Okay, tiles equals new integer list integer array of this size, which is 50 times 50. So if you go past that that size, then it would cause a problem. So I want to just make sure that I never go past that size. So I can do that inside the for loop, which is this is kind of cool about the for loop is you can just specify any number of like um, conditions to meet here, uh, and I'll put this in parentheses just to make it easier to kind of separate them out to see what's going on there, and so I want to make sure if I is also less than tiles dot length. So this is the way you get the length of the array, and this is the way you get the length of the array. If it's a JSON array, it's array.size. So that's basically it. So it's saying as long as I is less than the size of this array and it's also less than the size of the tiles array, then go ahead and set the object into the tiles, and then if once it goes past either of these, it'll just break out of this for loop, and that'll be done loading the map. So that should be it. So let me go ahead and hit save here. I'm going to just run the game. It's not going to load anything yet because I didn't actually call the load function. I just built the load function. Like I just built in the capability to load. I'm just running it to make sure I didn't have any like typos in the code here in this function. So it looks like everything was good there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually go ahead and load the map now. So I'm going to do that inside the setup function. If you remember, the setup function gets called only once at the beginning of the program, every time the program runs. So let me see here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as the last thing. So I'm going to say map, or yeah, map equals new map. I'm going to say map dot load map. Did I call it? I don't remember exactly what I called it. And then I'm going to pass in the actual file name here, which is bird's eye map _1.json. Let's copy this whole thing. All right. And you can name the file whatever you want. It doesn't have to be .json name to actually use JSON inside of it. It could be named whatever. So yeah, so that was the name. That looks like everything is good. So let me go ahead and run this, and I think it should work. Yep, there you go. So now I got the I have the map that I created originally. It looks like when I created the tiles are a little bit like in different order, I guess, than when I actually created this other map. So it's kind of like displaying the weird tiles in weird places. I think it's because I'm using a different tile palette than I used when I actually created this map for the other program that I made when I made this map. So it looks a little bit weird, but I mean, at least as you can see, it certainly loaded the map in, and that's what it's supposed to look like. I can remember that's what it was supposed to look like. So okay, so I'm going to go ahead and actually try to fix the tile palette so that it looks like the original map is supposed to look, and then that will set us up for the next step here, which I think I'll tell you in the next episode, which will be I'll like set up the ability for the map to like block the player, so the player can't. So one, the player can't go off the sides, and then the other, so the player can't like walk past certain tiles that they're not supposed to walk past. So go ahead and close this here, and let me see here. So what I want to do, I'm going to just look at the old program that I had, because this is this program here is what I created the map for. It has a different tile palette. Just the indexes and the tile palette are a little bit different. So okay, so I'm going to compare these together just to make sure I got the tile palette correct. So map 0 is the grass. Map 1 is the lava. Oh, yeah, that was the problem. Okay, so this is totally switched up. So I'm going to just go ahead and make it a little different. I want to make the same deal. Original one. Alright, I think that'll do it. So let's go ahead and play it. Okay, so yeah, now it looks like what I originally designed the map to look like. So this is exactly what the other map, the original map was supposed to look like here. So yeah, so I just adjusted the tile palette. That also kind of shows you like how powerful and simplistic having a palette makes it. You can easily switch up the images if you want. I could switch out totally different files and make things look totally different. You can actually, just based on what I have right now, if I just had better looking images for the tiles, I can make it look like really, really nice. Or I mean, I'll have to do some more to make it look like really nice, but I can make it look a lot nicer than what it is right now. So, anyways, I'll go ahead and I'll wrap this up now. So, the next episode, I'll show you how to block the player from walking like over the water, and this is supposed to be like blocked up here. The lava, I had it so that the player got blocked before he walked over the lava, and make it so that the player can't walk off the edge of the map either, or walk over the rocks here. So that's what I'll do in the next episode. Yeah, make sure to check out my Patreon page. There, you can actually download a demo of the original game that I created that I'm basing this tutorial on, and you can go ahead and play it and see what like the finished product will look like here. And Also, you can download the files. Okay, so new and improved demo level 1. So you can download this, and it's actually hosted on itch, and you can actually get the files that I use like for the map and for the tiles and for the player sprite and everything out of the download. I'll actually make another episode to show you how to do that, because you got to kind of extract it out of the program file. So that's everything for now. Thanks for watching, and I will check you later. Peace.